actually something that Paul Harvey had broadcast over the air in 1965. And I don't want to take anything away from Paul Harvey, because what I've done is I've modernized this just a little bit to fit my purposes, circumstances of the world today. But I would encourage you to go on YouTube or something and just pull up Paul Harvey. The speech is called "If I Were the Devil," and just listen to it. The things he said and how it's come true today. Almost, I think 100% of what he said has taken place now, 49 years later. So this is just my interpretation of it with a few additives. So it's called "If I Were the Devil." If I were the devil, I mean, if I were the prince of darkness, I would, of course, want to engulf the entire earth in darkness. I would control 1/3 of its real estate and 4/5 of its population. But I would not be happy until I had seized the ripest fruit on the tree. So I should set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I would begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of the serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve. Do as you please. Surely you will not die. To the young I would whisper, the Bible is a myth, just a fairy tale that someone made up. I would convince mankind that man created God instead of God creating man. I would confide to all that what is bad is good, and what is good is square, old-fashioned, antiquated. In the ears of young married couples, I would whisper that work is debasing, that partying is the only kind of life to live. I would caution them to not be extreme in religion, in patriotism, or in moral conduct. And the old, I would teach to pray. I would teach them to say after me, "Our Father, who art in Washington." Yes, if I were the devil, I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd flood the television airwaves with disgusting, immoral, and illegal scenarios, and I would glamorize them to the extent that those activities would seem right and normal. I would make pornography available to all ages, as easy as with the push of a button or the swipe of a finger. And then, if I were the devil, I'd get organized. I'd infiltrate the unions, and I would urge more loafing and less work. Because you see, idle hands usually are doing my work. In the schools, I would make the children so busy with activities that they would no longer have time to attend church. Without church, they would soon stop reading God's word, and prayer would cease. God's name would be taken in vain so casually that I'd have to expand the borders of hell to hold all the souls that will eventually spend eternity there. I would also convince the world that there is no hell, and there most certainly is no devil. I'd peddle drugs and narcotics to whomever I could. I would start them out early in life. You see, the younger the better. I'd take alcohol, tobacco, and casual drugs, and I'd glorify their usage by celebrities, athletes, and role models. You just wouldn't be cool if you didn't participate in these indulgences. And I'd tranquilize the rest of the population with prescription medication so that they couldn't care even if they wanted to. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to denigrate the young intellects and replace the truth with deceit at every opportunity I could find. Emotions and inner feelings would not be something to control or discipline, but an expression of freedoms that should just be allowed to run wild. If it feels good, do it. I would designate atheists and radical leaders of all manner of evils to be my spokespeople before the highest courts in the land as they demand equality and fairness under the guise of tolerance for all except Christians. And as a crowning touch, I would get the preachers to say from the pulpit that it's right. With flattery and promises of power, I would get the courts to rule what I construe as against God and in favor of all types of perversion. And thus, I would evict God from the courthouse, the schoolhouse, and then from the very houses of Congress. And then with great triumph, God would be evicted from his own church. I would instigate a religion of psychology as a substitute for a personal relationship with Jesus. I would deify science, because that way all men would become smart enough to create great weapons of mass destruction, but they would not be wise enough to control them. If I were Satan, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg, the symbol of Christmas a bottle. And if I were the devil, I would take from those who have worked hard for what they have, and I would give it to those who wanted it, until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And then by martial law, my police state would force everybody back to work. The work they would do would be for the building of the government and the government's power to control everyone's lives. There would be nothing the citizens could do because I would have already have disarmed them of their weapons and their rights. Then I would separate families. I would put everyone in uniform, making them non-identifiable, faceless zombies. And all objectors would be sent to slave camps if they were allowed to live. In other words, if I were Satan, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I would just continue doing exactly